As the years go by, the youth unemployment in Nigeria drastically increases because we have situations where per year there are lots of graduates. If you count the amount of universities in Nigeria, there are lots, and each year you get a huge amount of students graduating, and when they come out of uni into the workforce, it's hard for them to get jobs.
I think unemployment in Nigeria for youth today is really affecting the economy. I feel we have a lot of talented youths. I feel we have a lot of youths blessed with knowledge that would want to, or they would like to impact it in the Nigerian economy, but the unavailability of jobs is a restraint on that.
People that I know, that friends, people, acquaintances, classmates that I know that are unemployed, and challenges they face trying to find jobs, it's difficult. You keep applying to places and some you don't even get responses, so you don't even know what you did wrong in the first place, and then others are telling you they don't have budgets to hire people, and then some outright just are not looking for more to hire because everyone keeps saying that the COVID era hit hard, and yes, we know it did hit hard, and not a lot of funds are around right now.
Welcome to Youth Underemployment in Nigeria, a case for digital and technical skills, a Youth at Heart session organized by the Palladium Group. My name is Oisa Nicholson, and I will be your host for today. And with me are colleagues and an amazing lineup of experts in this space. Within the session, we'll be talking about the current state of play of youth underemployment in Nigeria, some of the pioneering and innovative solutions that we're taking to address the challenges, and particularly we'll be looking into the case of women in digital jobs. Over this session, you'll also see live polls that will go across your screen, and we invite you to participate in this. We'd love to hear your feedback and your comments, including how COVID has impacted your career so far. So I invite you to come along and participate, and looking forward to your feedback.
My name is Angorika Woke, and I am an analyst for Public Sector Development, Palladium's Nigeria office. We would like to present a selection of key statistics to you. Together, these figures help us to gain more insight into the youth unemployment problem in Nigeria. This in turn has helped us to identify the type of projects that can impact this status quo. Please join me in a quick statistical roadmap on youth unemployment in Nigeria. Nigeria's current population exceeds 204 million as of 2020. Out of this number, 90.47 million people are part of the workforce. This means they are aged between 16 to 64 and they are willing, able, and actively seeking work. Young males and females in the age range of 15 to 34 constitute over 40% of the total workforce. Yet, 64% of the total number of unemployed Nigerians are young men and women. This means that youth are more often unemployed than their older countrymen. To be a bit more specific, as of the second quarter of 2020, 40.8% of youths between 15 to 24 are unemployed. This is followed by the age group of 25 to 34 years at 30.7%. Across the total number of youth, an additional 27% is underemployed. This means they are engaged in work for less than 20 hours a week but more than 0 hours. The ratio of female to male youth unemployment rate is 1:1.99. This means that women of any age are 2 times as likely to be unemployed compared to the men. Taking into account the challenge that youth already face, it becomes clear that young women face even more challenge finding decent employment. These figures speak for themselves and clearly show the massive scale of the problem. However, the size of Nigeria's economy and continuous developing markets and related circumstances offer opportunities for youth employment. In the next set of statistics, I would like to introduce how digital jobs provide employment opportunities to the Nigerian youth. Research has confirmed that in general, there is a significant mismatch of 60% between expected skills and actual skills of graduates as experienced by the employers. Relevant skills mentioned include, amongst many others, IT skills. In another research, it has been indicated that 78% of a large sample of employees, employers, and educational institutes thinks digital skills will be of key importance in the next 10 to 20 years. The relevance of digital skills also applies to the entrepreneurs and the principle of self-employment. 80% of Nigerian youth are self-employed. As such, most youth are self-employed in Nigeria. The number of tech businesses, which tend to be started by or employing a majority of youth, has been rising. Nigerian youth feel positive about digital businesses. This includes, for example, web shops as opposed to the traditional brick and mortar shops. Technology-based entrepreneurship is on the rise. We see that Nigeria's information and communication technologies (ICT) sector is responsible for 10% of Nigeria's GDP. As of 2019, Nigeria has 55 active tech hubs supporting startups and growing enterprises such as the edutech, fintech, and e-commerce sectors. Even traditional sectors like the agricultural sector started to digitize in order to cost-effectively reach out to their client base. The Nigerian girls and young women indicated that they are not necessarily directly attracted to digital jobs. They consider the IT sector to be a men's world, requiring very technical programming skills. In practice, a digital skill set covers different digital ways of working in a huge variety of sectors and doesn't have to be extremely technical or difficult. In short, it becomes clear that digital across a variety of industries offer plenty of opportunity for the youth employment and youth self-employment in Nigeria. In addition, the current COVID-19 pandemic requires many organizations to rethink their business models. Almost all Nigerian businesses are impacted by the COVID-19 restrictions in one way or the other. External research amongst Nigerian MSMEs found that 80% of businesses expect that they will have to lay off staff. Although there are no exact figures available, it is expected that the number of vacancies has dwindled since the start of the outbreak. 88.6% of the Nigerian companies that submitted an application for our fund indicated that they have been directly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. 50% of these applicants indicated that they have had to digitize part of their operations in order to keep doing businesses. This mostly applied to their product or service delivery structure. This wraps up our statistical story. Hopefully, it has helped you gain more insight into the youth employment challenge in Nigeria and how we think digital jobs provide a solid opportunity for employment and self-employment. Now, let's hear how the youth in Nigeria feels affected by the COVID-19 crisis, and then continue by delving into one of our programs, Skills for Prosperity.
COVID and unemployment in Nigeria was a big blow. It really opened our eyes to the need for flexibility and the need to be able to change. During the COVID-19 epidemic is still going on right now, a lot of people lost their jobs. It's either you have to deal with losing your job or you have to deal with salary cuts, one of the two. So, and because of that, and especially because of the kind of skills they have, they were not able to progress or find something better to still remain relevant in the place where they work, or to be able to move to another place.
As a company and being a software development firm here at Woodlab Innovations, one thing with us was we were able to adapt very quickly to the COVID-19 pandemic, because we got to know that this is something that would change the landscape of work, the future of work globally. So we had to adjust immediately.
COVID-19 affected me positively. When it started and when I started doing my freelance jobs, I noticed that there were a lot of remote jobs, remote postings and remote jobs to do, and I've just been applying and I've been getting some. So I feel like because there are a lot of people that are trying to request for remote jobs now, since they're at home, it has given me the opportunity to apply for a lot.
COVID-19 changed the world, so at the point we had to start working from home. So adjusting to that was a big change because we've always been working from the office, so we had to start working from home. So that was a new thing.
We're delighted to have Tessa Nyoloku join us from the UK government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, where he leads skills and youth employment for the Prosperity Fund. Tessa is also the Senior Responsible Officer for the Skills for Prosperity program, which is also implemented by Palladium. Congratulations, Tessa, for the launch of the program. It's a really exciting program. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about it. Having spent many years within this space developing these sort of programs, I wonder if you could kick off by telling us a little bit about the skills situation for youth in Nigeria.
The situation in Nigeria is that our educational systems are failing to keep pace with the demands of industry. By that I mean that our general system of education is targeted around the supply side, and it's a little bit distant from what employers are saying they require. So there is recently a serious question around quality and relevance of the skills that young people acquire in training. I'm sure it's almost a cliche by now when you hear people say young people are not competent for the jobs that they're applying for. That is one of the signs that there is a gap, a skills mismatch that we must bridge. Now, when it comes to technical and vocational education specifically, we have a situation where there is a perception that those who embrace vocational skills as a means of livelihood are those that have failed with the general concept of education. And that being the case, there is a general abandonment of that pathway to learning. There's a new paradigm shift in the world where, in the way I refer to it, we are no longer in the era of professionalism. We are now in the era of creativity and innovation. And technical and vocational skills drive creativity and innovation. If that be the case, it means that for us to catalyze this economy and make it driven by small and medium scale enterprise, driven by young people to create employment and employability, it means that we need to focus more on how young people can acquire skills, valuable skills, technical and vocational skills, that will give them the wherewithal to be able to function as responsible members of the society.
That's really interesting. You talk about a mismatch, and you also talk about young people more inclined to go for the white-collar jobs and looking down a little bit more on the vocational jobs. I wondered, because you were so involved in the design of the Skills for Prosperity, do you want to talk a little bit more about how its approach is different, how it's been designed to address some of these issues you talk about?
So we thought that Skills for Prosperity could catalyze a new pathway to learning that is career-oriented for young people and is mainstream with general education, meaning that it is also a pathway to education alongside being a pathway to acquiring skills, and is recognized by government and also endorsed by industry. We envisage that this partnership would foster the necessary new partnerships that is required between government, the social sector, and also the private sector institutions to drive that new learning pathway. So it will be the education system as we have it now, offering opportunities with qualifications in formal apprenticeships. So these are not students that come every day and sit in school. They are students that are with the industry and they come to school occasionally. But the courses are offered, assessed and recognized by the schools.
That's excellent. And where do you see this program, where do you see the outcomes for this program 3 years from now?
In 3 years, success will be, we have institutionalized a formal apprenticeship system that is recognized and respected by youth and has become the first choice for their education and learning. And secondly, for those that will not have the necessary prerequisite knowledge to participate in the formal systems, especially women and some other youths that can't meet that same thing, we think about them, because in this case we want to, success would look like supporting state governments to be able to entrench a system that provides vocational skills specifically for women to drive their businesses. So it is actually going to be through some private sector development interventions to see how women can improve on their income through improving on their skills.
It's really great to hear the inclusive approaches that you're taking and including women in this as well. Being slightly familiar with the Skills for Prosperity program, I know that it's in its design, it's doing quite a lot of work with people. It has a focus on people living with disabilities. I don't know, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, it has a strong focus at ensuring equity. So our equity strand will focus on particularly vulnerable women and persons with disabilities. I know the term person with disabilities is broad, but we hope that this program will be able to be as socially inclusive as possible.
Thank you, Tessa. That was really informative, and I look forward to hearing more about the achievements in the next 3 years, when hopefully the program would have achieved these outcomes. Congratulations once again, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I would like to improve my skills in video editing, in shooting different types of videos, and working with other softwares.
After school, I started serving here at Safital, and I've been able to learn new skills aside from what I learned in school, like animation, course digitization.
In regards to profession, learning a profession, I picked up graphics design, and then which later translated to UI UX design, and that saw me moving into becoming a front-end developer, which is my main job description at the moment.
So welcome back. In this session, we're going to be talking about the Challenge Fund for Youth Employment, which is a challenge fund set up by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. With me, I have Nneka Nwowu, who is our country lead for Nigeria, implementing this fund. Nneka, you're welcome.
Hi, Elsa. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you on the show. So, the Challenge Fund for Youth Employment, we know over the past sessions we've been talking about the challenge and state of play of youth employment in Nigeria, also talking about digital skills and the challenge of getting women into digital jobs. The Dutch Youth Challenge Fund is already doing quite a lot of this and looking at solutions, innovative solutions for creating jobs for youth. Could you tell us just a little bit more about what it's about, what it does, the target states, and some of the outcomes that it's looking to achieve?
Thank you, Eza. So, as you so rightly said, the Challenge Fund was launched by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the aim of the fund is to create decent employment for 200,000 young people, 100,000 of whom must be women. We work in a number of regions, the Middle East, North Africa, West Africa, and the Horn of Africa, including Kenya and Uganda. The fund is being managed by a consortium. There are 3 organizations in the consortium: Palladium International, which is a global international development company that has expertise in managing challenge funds and private sector development. You have Randstad, which is a market leader in recruitment and career planning, and you have BSO International, which is an international NGO with expertise in gender, inclusion, employment, and education. Now, we operate in these countries by running what we call context-specific challenges or calls for proposals, where we invite various organizations, private sector, government, civil society, to send in applications that will address the youth unemployment constraints in the countries that fall within that region.
That's fantastic. And while you were, I recall, while you were doing or putting out the calls for solutions to the Challenge Fund, you spoke to quite a lot of stakeholders, which included youth, private sector companies, quite a wide range of people. Could you talk about some of the takeaways that came out of those conversations?
It was a really interesting study, and we found out quite a number of things, but I'll just highlight a few. I'll start with the most important one, which is the huge skills mismatch between the requirements of the employers and the current skills that young people have. And what we realized was that at the core of fixing the youth unemployment issue in Nigeria is bridging that gap. Another thing that was interesting that we found out was the fact that young people did not know the type of skills that made them employable, be it soft skills, technical skills. They were quite unaware of how to make themselves, what kind of skills to get to make themselves more employable. The third thing we found out was that a lot of young people took up what we call survivalist type jobs to earn an income or earn a living, but those had no bearing on their future plans or their future careers. And another interesting thing we found out was that internships were something that employers valued, but were not necessarily interested in paying for. So those were just a couple of things we found out.
And what would you say has been sort of the approach of choosing what sectors the Challenge Fund focuses on, or is the approach sector agnostic?
So we're not sector agnostic. So in designing our recent call for proposals for Nigeria, we used 3 major criteria to identify the areas we should focus on, or the type of jobs we should focus on. The first criteria was we looked at the high priority sectors or high growth sectors, if you like. The second criteria we looked at was where the demand was. So, for example, as a result of the COVID pandemic, where there was a high demand for people who had digital skills because businesses were trying to migrate online during the lockdown. And then the third criteria we used was youth aspiration. So you find that young people are quite innovative, like doing things that are, that involve using technology. So we looked at that, all those three parameters or those three criteria in determining which windows we wanted to focus on. And we arrived at two main windows. The first one, not surprisingly, is the digital jobs. And these are jobs that are either enhanced, created, or supported by technology. The second window is the technical craftsmanship, which are jobs that are tied to technical and vocational skills.
In earlier sessions, we talked about the challenge of women facing getting into digital jobs. We also talked about how culture and religion sometimes puts women on the back foot. And I wondered, what's been your experience with the Challenge Fund as to how do you feel that women are more at a disadvantage or not?
So I actually feel that women are at a disadvantage mainly because of the educational opportunities that are not readily available to them. Secondly, general feedback that came from discussions with stakeholders was that the sector is generally perceived as or tech jobs are perceived as men's jobs. So you find that very few women actually apply to those jobs on their own. And then thirdly, there's this general preference to hire men as opposed to women, and I think you also find it in other sectors as well. I mean, there are many ways one can address it, but one of the key ways I think we should be looking at is more advocacy to get to create awareness, and hopefully that will bring about some change.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nneka, and thanks for taking the time to tell us a little bit more about the Challenge Fund for Youth Employment. And we look forward to carrying this conversation forward and just hearing a little bit more in future about some of the results it's achieved. Thank you very much.
As a cinematographer, my aspirations in life is to become good in animations, to be able to work in bigger projects like movies, music videos, to own a production company sometime later in life and manage it.
I would like to learn more about user experience design for more engaging e-learning content.
I would like to be a full stack developer working in a good company like Facebook, for example.
Welcome again to Youth Underemployment, a case for digital and technical skills. My name is Oiza Nicholson. I'm the Country Director for Palladium in Nigeria, and I'm also your host for this session. With me are a lineup of wonderful, amazing leaders within this industry. They're going to be talking a little bit more about the challenges of women in digital jobs. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us on this session. I'm looking forward to really interesting discussion on this topical issue. But before we go into it, I'd like to hear briefly what your company does individually. So if we start with Tayo.
Okay, thank you very much for having us. My name is Tayo and I'm from Mind the Gap. Just like the name says, Mind the Gap basically went to strategic skills development and job creation and social enterprise incubation. And the emphasis of that basically is looking at skills that are market-ready skills to actually address, job issues in areas of interest. An area of interest now meaning youth and women and young girls. It's been amazing, and it's been almost like a default position to work with women in Mind the Gap. We have a 25 men staff, and 18 of them are women.
Thank you, Tayo. Damnola, Can you tell us a little bit more about Sprout and what you do?
Okay, so I run Sprout Digital, and Sprout Digital is an ICT for development company, and that means that we like to focus on technology solutions that help and aid development across the continent. That ranges from whether you're thinking about education or you're thinking about, social impact projects as well. And one of the things that we do for our CSR project is that we teach kids to code through the coded program, and that's because we believe that the earlier, they're never too young to learn, and the earlier they can start to learn such skills, then the better for them.
My name is Ibere, and I'm the co-founder for Capital Learning Limited. Every year, we run a training program where we bring youths across the country. We train them for free. We train them on skills like animation, photography, cinematography, e-learning, digitization, content creation. Then we teach them how to create platforms for learning. So we digitize content, we create the content, we animate them, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, different languages, Pidgin. We just make it available and more better for people to learn, not just the word or the text.
We have 3 strands of our work. The first of them is digital literacy, and that's all about how do we get people to embrace digital. We strongly believe that if women learn and embrace digital, they will pass it on to their children. The second strand is community. And it is under our community strand that I've met people like Dami, even though I've known Dami for years. But it's also under that community strand that I'm going to be engaging these ladies after this conversation. So whether it's chaperoning first-time women, aspirants, or it is leading, causes like Not Too Young to Run, State of Emergency, GBV, or contributing tech support to causes like EndSARS, we're very, very big on how do we use technology to solve problems. That's what Tekka does.
So Damilala, earlier we were talking about what you do at Sprout Digital. I wondered if you could give us your perspective on what the current state of play of digital jobs is in Nigeria and getting used into that space.
Okay, that's a really good question. There are the technical skills that we expect young people to have when it comes to digital skills. And then there are those that we don't expect you to have, web development skills or IT skills or whatever it is. But we do expect you to have a level of digital skills that is supposed to help you and help us when you come into the organization, and that usually is lacking. And when I say level of IT skills, I'm talking about people that studied accounting or even administration, and then they don't have the basic, I know how to use Microsoft Office, I know how to, use the web, I know how to search for information and get the right information. And so the combination of those skills are actually important for any young person to have. And what we found in trying to employ people is that there's such a big gap between the haves and the have-nots when it comes to those skills. We put up an application about a few weeks ago, and we had over 200 people in Abuja alone that applied for a particular position, and it was at the admin position. And still, when we told them to do a simple test on, put on the computer, go into Google Docs and just, get a basic document done, 70% of those people could not. And I think it's important for every young person to be able to do that. Because if you don't, then you're not going to have that opportunity, and you're not going to have that opportunity that's available to us because of the technology that actually exists right now.
And I tend to always come from like a government point of view, and the biggest example of this is our school tour. So we have this tour we're doing in local education authority schools, about 10 of them in Abuja. Of course, this was hindered or hampered by COVID, but by the time the lockdown started, we'd been to 7 schools and interacted with about 700 children. And 7 schools, 6 of them have never been connected to electricity. Never. This is in the Federal Capital Territory. And so we had grand plans. We were going to take a projector, we were going to play, videos for them, we're going to do this, do that, till we started doing the recce to the schools and found out there was no electricity. We've also found out that some places we couldn't even drive, so we had to take Okada, so bikes, motorcycles. And so I said, how are we going to handle computers, projectors, a small generator, and then of course snacks, because these are children. And so we decided to produce playing cards. And so we produced playing cards modeled after what? Because pretty much every Nigerian child or every Nigerian family has had a what card passed through their houses. So we used those cards to, just put tech messaging and questions and pictures, so that as they're playing, so we take the cards to the schools, and as they're playing, then they're asking questions. And so we can, as it were, introduce them to some sort of technology. So if you look at government offices, there's tons and tons of paper. Imagine if we had institutionalized tech servicing within government. The government in Nigeria is mammoth, right? It would absorb so many young people. It would create a real need for these.
There are a lot of important points you've made, in that conversation, and some things struck me. So there's obviously a skills gap that Damola talked about. There's the infrastructure gap, and I like the point about institutionalizing or creating the demand for it, and that's a really important thing. To what extent do we think culture and religion plays a role into getting women or girls into digital jobs?
I tell this story a lot, that when I told my father wanted me to study international relations, something he could relate with. So international relations or law or something like that. And then I said I wanted to study social media. So we had the argument about money. And then he was like, okay, I'll pay. Then he told someone, my child is going to the UK to study, social media. And they said she's going to study Facebook. So we had a massive argument. Eventually I studied it. Till today, I don't really think my father grasps what I do. But sometimes he sees me on TV, sometimes he sees me in print. Okay, your child is not a criminal, Sometimes he sees me on stages locally or internationally. But that full understanding sometimes is not really there, which is why it's one of the things that drive me at Teka, because our generation, if we understand technology, because now I'm the auntie that, my cousins say, oh, talk to your auntie about the computer. The remote is bad, talk to your auntie. And if I segue a little bit, if you even look at what's going on in the country right now with EndSARS, there's a generation of people who don't understand how young people are making money, how they're carrying laptops and money is coming out. And that's what it's like. There's a shift that needs to happen in our minds, that not every job is 9 to 5. Sometimes you can produce, some code or create an app or create a website, and then it goes on to bring money for you, and it's not fraud. Are there fraudulent people? Of course. Are there scammers? Yes. But tech is an entire horizon, an entire spectrum of work, user experience testing, development, all those types of things, and those things bring money.
We actually found that girls will naturally not navigate towards tech jobs. And that comes from their home. It comes from the mindset that they get from home, culturally, whatever it is that is happening. And so what we are saying now is, you need to start shifting that conversation to don't just go into the kitchen and cook. Or don't just be, I remember growing up, my dad would tell me, but you won't find anybody to marry you if you're not, homely, if you can cook, if you can clean the house. And so it's important that those conversations that we're having culturally that says a woman has to just do this, we're not saying we don't want to do those things, but we're saying it has to be a general conversation about her also learning technical skills as well.
We're quite fortunate to have Amina with us, who's gone through Capital Learning. It would be great to get a bit of your experience. How's it been? How's the journey been for you?
I wouldn't say it's been easy. Honestly, it's been quite demanding, tasking, but at the same time refreshing from what I was used to. And just as they said, it's from home actually. When I got offered the letter at first, my mom was like, no, just finish your master's and wait for a job. How long am I going to wait for a job? I have to get a job for myself, because I was finished rounding up my master's program, and I wasn't just going to sit at home and do nothing for why, when I could do other stuff as well. So it comes down to also personal interest. If you're willing to and you fight it, you might have a chance at being allowed. Because I'm from a conservative northern family, and we all know how our parents can be very overbearing sometimes. And it comes from a place of concern. We get that, we understand. But at the same time, they need to let us be able to experience life. They're trying so hard to shield us, but in actual reality, they're over-shielding us, if I could say. Because I don't know a lot of things that happen outside, because I'm sorry to use the word baby, because I'm the last of my family and it's quite a large family. So I'm babied, and then I don't know the struggles other people go through. So it's left for me to go out and experience it, see it, and then I want to do something about it. Then I want to improve myself. Then I want to make sure that people around me or behind me don't also go through that. So I think it comes down to us wanting to also improve ourselves, because if I didn't want to in the first place, I would have just followed my mom. Yeah, I should just wait for a job. That'll be safer. It's risky, but at the same time, it allows you to see a different world, a better world, and how you can fix so many things around us.
You know firsthand the challenges in that space, incentivizing young people, women, into the digital space, creating content, exactly, that journey that Amina has taken us through. And what kind of skills should they be looking to develop?
The skills that you need today, for me, I would say everybody is going towards digital. So at least learn how to use a camera. You become self-employed. You might not need me tomorrow. We have a course where as an SME you can take a professional product shoot, right, without coming to a studio. By the time you're done with the course, your 7-year-old or your 5-year-old could take very good pictures without going to a studio. Yes, it might make the studios lose out on money, but then how many people can afford going to studios as an SME? So we're teaching you how to have that your YouTube channel. We're teaching you how to have a cinematographer, operate a Canon or a 4K camera without needing anybody's assistance. And this thing is in a space of 9 weeks. I think the first thing is an open mind. If you don't have an open mind, no matter what we train you for the 9 weeks, you'll be like, oh, it's so stressful, but just have an open mind. And they'll have an age range. You can't come into the program if you're up to 25. So it has to be between 18, 19 to 24. We just feel, okay, we catch them young, then train you, and then employ you. So by the time you're 26, 27, you can resign and then start off something on your own. So that's there.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tayo, Mind the Gap. I mean, you've done a lot in this space as far as tackling youth underemployment. Eberechi talked a little bit about, engaging government. I wanted to ask from you, what more do you think needs to be done by private sector to get more youth into this space, and specifically young women?
Except you bring technology into the conversation of economic development, we're going nowhere, especially as Africa. Africa is going to remain behind. We relate with a whole lot of all these private big collaborations. They are very, very interested in tech. They are very, very strongly interested in female. They are very, very interested in even getting into the inclusive, the excluded space, talking about the very deep rural places. And that is why we also think that one of the things that is emerging very strongly is what we now call digital onboarders. It's a project we decided to launch that if we're able to get a minimum of about 10,000 to 100,000 people who are ready to really be onboarders, who people realize that Nigeria as a nation need to be onboarded into the digital economy. So that alone is a job. And so they take it upon themselves to ensure, number one, everybody is able to make the most of the web, which is the new oil well today is the web. So I think it's about the private sector organization. It's a personal interest for them to get involved in ensuring that we expand the space, because the more the number of people who can use technology to drive accounting, to drive engineering, to drive all the various sectors, to drive even tailoring. You understand? The deeper the opportunity that's expanding to all of us. I don't know if that quite...
You make, again, really interesting points there. Something that struck me is around digital onboarding. But I wanted to come back to you, Damilola, and around, there seems to be a theme around, building examples, around women supporting each other, around mentoring. And I wanted to ask, what do you think women should do to support each other to get into this space?
When I started off, there were a few women that, were very strong in the tech space, but they were so busy doing what they were doing for their businesses, and no fault of theirs, for their businesses, for themselves to get ahead, that they didn't actually pay attention to the people that they were bringing along on those journeys. And so I had to learn virtually from whatever it was they were doing, going online, looking through, their profiles, and I did that. But one of the things that I chose to do differently was, I said, you know what, even if it's just going to be 5 people in a year that you're going to bring into your office and spend time and hours with, and just talk about what that path is. And, I can be very aggressive and want to mentor you. I'll be like, okay. If you come back the next day and you haven't done what you were supposed to do, I'll be like, nope, you have to get it done. And, so just being able to say, you know what, I'm not going to say it, do it by mouth. I'm not going to say this thing by, I'm doing it, I'm just doing it for show, but actually really doing it in terms of what's going on with you, where were you last week, where are you now, and actually picking up a few people on the journey.
Wow, this has been quite an informative session for me, and I'd like to thank the panel for sharing your experiences, your ideas. I mean, a few takeouts for me from this session is thinking about how we create demand for digital jobs, digital careers, and institutionalizing it in both government and private sector in our dealing. I think that was really important. Mabera, you talked about how we might incentivize people and particularly women into digital jobs. They first need to come with an open mind, you know, and a willingness to learn. We talked about digital onboarding, creating champions for that sort of change. And where culture and religion plays a role, we need to have a bit of a mind shift that there is a career in digital jobs. There is, you know, there is quite lucrative, you know. So I think that's been really informative. I'd like to thank you once again. And I'd like to invite the viewers to continue this conversation in the next session where my colleague Joost will be taking on a little bit more what we do on the Youth Challenge Fund and including women in digital jobs. Thank you.